We have bad news for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The former presidential candidate and avid lover of chocolate pudding got a big setback after a 3-judge appeals court panel unanimously voted on Monday to block the implementation of Florida's Stop Woke Act. That's right. From now on, Florida shall be filled with the woke. To the brim. To the brim. Tons and tons of woke.
The wokers.
Okay, they're coming. The wokers are coming. All right, anyway. Now, the panel consisted of judges Charles R. Wilson, Andrew L. Brasher, and Britt Grant. The latter two having been appointed. And this is actually the cherry on the top of all of this, right? Not only is Stop Woke stopped, but two of the judges that made this decision were Trump appointees. Oops. Oh, you gotta love it.
Whoopsie.
All right. Respectively, Wilson was appointed by former President Bill Clinton back in 1999. But of course, you had Grant and Brasher being appointed by Trump in 2020 and 2018. Now, back in August of 2022, Chief U.S. District Judge Mark Walker of Tallahassee had actually placed a preliminary injunction against the implementation of this Stop Woke Act. Now, the reasoning, of course, they used is that it violated the First Amendment rights of business owners. And, of course, this preliminary injunction was upheld in that unanimous ruling on Monday, where the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld it, finding that the law did violate the First Amendment rights of business owners, private business owners. Now, the Stop Woke Act was designed to block certain teachings about race and diversity in both schools and workplaces. So, particularly any notions that individuals might be privileged or face oppression due to race, sex, or national origin, which DeSantis has decried as woke indoctrination, but is reality. To say that people do not and have not experienced any sort of discrimination or oppression due to those factors is just, I mean, it's ahistorical, okay? Like, have you ever looked at a history book? Ever? No, apparently not. So now this whole thing, of course, is going after DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's a lot of private businesses that have voluntarily enacted these DEI policies. And this law banning them steps on their right, steps on the rights of employers who want to use DEI. So in their 22-page opinion from the panel, they explain their ruling, saying this is not the first era of which Americans have held widely divergent views on important areas of morality, ethics, law, and public policy. It's not the first time these disagreements have seemed so important and their areas so dangerous that something had to be done. But now, as before, the First Amendment keeps the government from putting its thumb on the scale. So understand how important that is, right? So this really illustrates what Republicans have been trying to do for a long time. They have been trying to use the power of government to shut down people's ability, not only teachers' ability to teach about race and gender, things that exist, right? And history. Now they've also tried to take that ability away from employers, okay, from the business community, using the power of government to stifle speech and information that they don't approve of. That's pretty damn dystopian. Furthermore, the court panel writes, the ideas targeted in Florida's Individual Freedom Act are embraced in some communities and despised in others. By limiting its restrictions to a list of ideas designated as offensive, the act targets speech based on its content, and by barring only speech that endorses any of those ideas, it penalizes certain viewpoints, the greatest First Amendment sin. And there it is. Don't you love it when the Constitution wins? I know I do. I'm an American, and I love the Constitution, especially the First Amendment. And what Republicans have been doing is trying to systematically crush the First Amendment. Okay? And they've also tried to pervert the First Amendment by claiming that it protects discrimination based on religion. But that's an entirely different conversation as well. But it's the same perversion, okay? And in this case, they're saying, well, you know, it's not free speech to teach DEI, to teach the, you know, the actual history. That's indoctrination. No, what you're doing is indoctrination. This is literal projection. Now, DeSantis, of course, hates the Constitution, as a lot of these Republicans do. He's pissed, according to a statement from his office, quote, yesterday, the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit held that companies have a right to indoctrinate their employees with racist and discriminatory ideologies. Again, we're just talking about history here. In facts, we disagree with the court's opinion that employers can require employees to be taught, as a condition of employment, that one race is morally superior to another race. Once again, that's not what DEI is about. It's not what critical race theory is about. The First Amendment protects no such thing. And the state of Florida should have every right to protect Floridians from racially hostile workplaces. We are reviewing all options on appeal going forward. I don't know why I'm talking like a Ferengi, but it just, every time, Republicans, you're Ferengi. Okay? That's what they are. But it's funny that he talks about racially hostile workplaces. Funny, right? They only seem to have a problem with the perception of that now. You know, and again, you're teaching facts, okay? I mean, companies are pointing out how black people, and teachers, by the way, as well, haven't really had it all that great in this country historically. When you do that, well, that's when you get the ire of Republicans, right? But didn't have a problem when companies were actively being the ones that were making sure that black people had a bit of a harder time in this country, okay? When they would underpay black people, which they still do, or just not hire them as a result of their race, which guess what? They also still do, okay? I don't think I need to remind you of the study where, you know, you have applicants with the same skill and educational levels, identical, essentially, applications, okay, with the same credentials and everything on it, but just different names. Black-sounding names versus white-sounding names. And guess what? The black-sounding names got less callbacks than the white-sounding names. Funny that. So it still happens. Now, here's the thing. This has widespread economic consequences. Aside from just, you know, the discriminatory aspect of it, it hurts the economy. Racism hurts the economy. I know, shocker, right? In fact, according to a 2021 report by Citi, if the black wage, education, housing, and investing gaps had been closed 20 years ago, and there are massive gaps, it would have added an estimated $16 trillion to the economy, with the black pay gap alone accounting for some $2.7 trillion. That is wages that should have gone to black workers, that they could have used for houses, cars, consumer goods, food, you name it, entertainment. That's money that's gone. That should have been in their hands, stolen from them. And there's more. There's an analysis from the Economic Policy Institute, which pointed out that while net productivity per household per hour worked, increased by 69.6% between the years of 1979 and 2019, median wages for all workers only grew about 14%. So that sucks. So American workers overall are more productive than ever, almost 70%, but only saw a wage increase of about 14%. That's dismal. But when you get into demographics, it actually gets even worse, because while productivity per hour, increased, right, of white people by 20%, it only grew for black workers by 5.2%. So understand, when you account for race, white people did better than black people, even though all workers did not get the share that they deserved from the increase in their productivity. So we're all working harder, and black people are working just as hard as the rest of us and are getting left behind. And this is not in the past, as I mentioned, this is happening today. In fact, in 2019, the typical black worker earns 24.4% less per hour than the typical white worker. And when you control for racial differences in education, experience, and the fact that black workers are more likely to live in lower wage states in the South, you still have an unexplained gap of 14.9% in 2019. So, can't explain where about 15% of your wages as a black person went when controlling for these other factors. I mean, they say they can't explain it, but we can. It's racism. Okay, it's because they're black. And by the way, this racism is also meant to keep all workers down. The analysis found that a racial hierarchy of workers is able to be more exploited by owners of capital to subvert worker solidarity and capture a larger share of workers' productivity as economic profit. In short, employers can get away with paying black and white workers a wage below their marginal productivity if, on average, the weight white workers place on being relatively better off than black workers is sufficiently high, and white workers are paid a wage that is above that of black workers. Thus, both white labor and white capital jointly can benefit from discrimination against black workers. That right there is why we need critical race theory. This is why we need DEI. This is what Republicans, white Republicans, don't want you to know. That right there. And it all goes back, by the way, to MLK Jr. Before he was assassinated, he tried to get white sanitation workers to join together with black. One of his main things was to try to get white working class people together with black working class people so that we can all stand in solidarity against capital. To unite for better wages and working conditions for all workers. To lift us all up. He used to point out that racism is used as a weapon, pointed at poor white people as well as black people, to keep all working people down. And that in order to raise us all up, black people have to be raised up on par to white working class people as well, so that we can all join together in solidarity to fight for what we're owed: a good job, fair pay, and a decent living. What Republicans are doing today, by erasing the history and preventing it from being taught, and labeling it woke indoctrination, which doesn't mean anything, what they're doing is ultimately protecting that system of exploitation against both the white working class and the black working class, and preventing us from getting ultimately what we are all owed for our work.